All right. Is the microphone working?
Testing, testing.
Hello, hello. Now it's working? Oh, okay, amazing. Can we maybe put on the slide with the speaker names? Amazing. So first of all, very welcome to this afternoon session on AI governance. I'm glad you all made it back from lunch. So I think with AI being all over the place, and I mean coming from Google, I mean that in all the good ways, I think it's equally important that we have a safe set of governance and like rules around it right from the get-go. My name is Katrina. I'm part of the startups and VC team here at Google Cloud. And I'm excited to welcome some of Ireland's brightest minds on AI governance here, in particular because I actually used to study IT policy in Brussels myself. So I would like for you to introduce yourselves before we kick it off then. And a round of applause for them right from the get-go.
Hi, so I'm Linda NiChualladh and I work in Citi and I'm a lawyer and my background is antitrust, which is looking at cartels, monopolies and market behaviour across different types of markets and activities and investigating white-collar crime, which then led to data protection, which then led to AI.
Labhaoise Ní Fhaoláin. I'm a former solicitor and I'm doing a PhD in computer science in Citi on the governance of artificial intelligence.
Hi, I'm Lollie. I'm the Programme Director in the Innovation Academy in Digital Resilience and also helping. I'm an anthropologist who ended up in innovation by a number of strange squiggles. But I've looked very much at the human flourishing side of AI and found more and more in the last couple of years that I'm looking at what will it mean for society to flourish as a whole, whose voices are heard, whose voices aren't heard.
Hi everyone, Jared is my name. I started out my life in philosophy, so undergraduate and master's degree in philosophy, and I'm quite amused that that philosophy training is actually coming back into vogue now with all these AI issues that are on top of us. I retrained as a lawyer after that, and the last 14 years has been all compliance, data protection, and AI governance in the last couple of years. And I came all the way up from Kerry yesterday, so I'm representing the southwest of Ireland today.
Well, then thanks for taking on this commute. So just to give some framework, we'll have around 40 minutes to discuss some questions that I've prepared, and then I'll open it up to questions from the audience in the end. And we'll talk about different angles to AI governance, the first being the power of collaboration. What role do you think industry collaborations, partnerships, and initiatives for knowledge sharing play in shaping those best practices for startups, AI governance in Europe and beyond?
I'll jump in first, if that's okay. So I think it's critical in one-word response. It's critical to bring all of the parties together, to bring in the stakeholders. Really good governance and effective governance. I'm glad we're talking about governance and not talking about that narrow idea of regulation, not just talking about the AI Act, but the good governance involves stakeholders from the get-go in a situation, work that I'm doing on reflexive governance. So that's where all of the stakeholders need to be involved and they need to learn from each other. So in a reflexive kind of mode. And I guess a really, when we look at, for example, the AI Council, the Advisory Council appointed by the government, it's a really, really good example of a really poor balance of voices. So in that particular situation, it's great. You have 7 industry, you have 6 academia, one person who's not either, but where's civil society there? So I think, and Lollie, I think will certainly agree with this, that it's critical that these partnerships happen, that industry collaborates with academia, but also that civil society is involved as well.
Yeah, I might just jump straight in there because 100%. It's really interesting because you imagine, I think most of us in this industry are in a bit of an echo chamber where we imagine everyone's having conversations like this. They're really not. So, you know, in wider society, the amount of misinformation and fear that's currently out there, you know, I mean, and from an educational perspective as well, you know, yes, we need to pool our resources to conduct research. I'm working at the moment through my role in the Innovation Academy and independently with some academics across the world, you know, in terms of how do we engender critical thinking in primary school even, to begin to start to understand governance, because we haven't been teaching that. And I'm tasked with the beautiful job of trying to create courses for the job workplace of the future that doesn't yet exist. I know there's certain things that we absolutely have to have, and that is a healthy mistrust. That is the idea of critical thinking and problem solving, and this idea of engendering curiosity. And our curriculums aren't set for that and haven't been. So there's sort of initiatives now right across academia and beyond to say, oh my God, quick, how do we bring in critical thinking now without waiting for sort of curricula to change, in terms of helping our youth and sort of what is now Gen Alpha to navigate what's coming. We have to have a bottom-up and a top-down approach for this, and everybody's voices have to be heard. And it's just not good enough that it's given to academics and businesses. For the majority of people, they're going to be enormously affected. And if we don't get a handle now on sort of garnering public trust and understanding that we can all address that fear in a really transparent way, I think we're going to have some serious problems.
Yeah, one of the things, like coming from the point of view of an organization where you might be subject to governance requirements or obligations, no matter what size, it's understanding, what do you mean by governance? Like, what are we talking about here? So it's about not just complying with the law, it's about the spirit of what you're doing and how you're doing it. It's understanding your responsibility and who is accountable for the decisions that you make and the effects that they will have. And that's the difference. It's not just, oh, can we get a tick there to say we ran this past legal? Can we get the compliance people in to challenge that what's done is done? Do we get an external auditor to say, look, it looks grand? It's not that. It's actually what happens right at the beginning of governance, which is, and in the case of AI governance, what are we doing? Who will be affected by this? How are we going to be accountable for what we are doing? And how, in a lot of cases, how can we still make money? How can we still make a living? How can we innovate? And those voices are really, really important. So for me as a legal advisor, I want to get in there right at the beginning, not because I'm curious, which I am all the time, but I also want to use my skill set, which is not just about the law, but it's also about helping people interpret things, acting as a translator, acting as an interpreter as well for people from different backgrounds, from different thought processes, coming together to try and agree on something. And that's really the hardest thing to do. So we can talk about all the specifics of the AI Act and all these quirks and the technical things, but ultimately we're talking about people trying to communicate with each other about what it is that they're trying to achieve and how best to do it in a way that doesn't harm people. And it's all about the risk to individuals. That's what we're talking about when we talk about risk.
It's going to require a culture of transparency and accountability. And let's face it, that's not been our forte. So, how do we bring everyone's voices in so that people trust the decisions are being made in their best interests?
Can I just come in maybe on the more operational side for startups? There are some collaborations and initiatives to be aware of. I guess one is the innovation sandboxes, which are going to be required in every member state under the AI Act. So Ireland is going to have to create one soon. So if you have a startup that's in the high risk space, then definitely get in touch with the government about using the sandbox. It'll be free if you're an SME or a small enterprise, and you can go nuts with killer risks in there if you want. It's all safe. It's just buckets and spades and sand. The other one is to be aware of is the EU has just created the AI office right now to try and integrate guidance around the AI Act. So watch out for all the guidance coming out of the AI office. And the other one to be aware of is the AI Pact. The AI Pact is starting now, and this is driven by the EU to try and close the gap because most of the AI Act won't be operational for another 2 years. So in the meantime, they still want companies to worry about responsible AI. So if you're interested in integrating it into your startup or your company, look up the AI Pact as well, I would say.
And finally, just to follow on from what Jared was saying there, also under the AI Act, the guidelines are going to be drafted by the Commission. And the latest date when they will come into effect is 6 months before the enactment of the majority of the provisions. But I think it's critical for industry to get involved in the guidelines. The consultation is going to be open soon, but really this is where the rubber hits the road, and they're looking for use cases. they're going to be actively looking. But really, I think you guys need to get involved in that to demonstrate how the AI Act might work, because at the moment, on the face of it, it's not possible to interpret exactly how that should work, but you need to input into that process, I think.
No voice is too small. Honestly, it isn't. Having seen these types of changes in the law in different areas and sectors and cross-sectoral areas, so remember that power that you have.
Because it will ultimately affect all of you. And I like that you did the segue into my next question, which is some practical advice for our founders. So can you maybe share some best practices on how to ensure that AI algorithms and decision-making is fair and equal in the end?
We could probably start with representative data sets for a starter, and more diversity, and then in implementing transparency mechanisms. This is all going to be based on trust to a very large extent. And then I think also, as we've alluded to already, explaining the AI-driven decisions to all the stakeholders. How does this work? Why will it work? What won't work? What are the limitations of it? Generative AI is not a magic wand or a bit of magic to sprinkle on everything like beans that spring up and everything's fruitful. Yet an awful lot of industry is saying, quick, implement it. We don't know what it is really or how it works, but just get it in there. We have to be much more cautious than that and have to understand exactly what's happening. We also can't hand all of this over in our businesses to our CTOs and expect that they have all of the answers. Acknowledge that you don't know potentially the gaps and upskill yourself as well as best you can, but also have a conversation with those people in your organization to say, where are we all starting from here? There's always, in a culture of transparency, it has to be built based on the fact that there is no such thing as failure. It has to be built on the fact that there is no such thing as shame, that we all start from a level playing ground of we're all a little bit confused here. So how do we help ourselves out?
Can I just come in on the back of that one? Maybe I would just say three things to this question always, which is testing, and testing, basically. Because I think if we're talking about machine learning algorithms and a black box effect, we're never going to be able to understand that with principled reasoning about what goes right and what goes wrong. So it's inputs and outputs and constant testing. And I guess we're in Google today, so it's okay to mention the Google Gemini issue from a few months ago when the image generating system ended up giving improperly diverse ranges. So people asked for a picture of a founding father of the US and they got racially diverse images. So basically, Google is trying to do the right thing to defeat the bias there. It's just that it's so difficult to do the training and defeat that bias. So what they said in their own blog post about that, Google, is that when the system was asked for something specific, it was instructed to give a range. And then you can obviously see how that gets a bit weird on the misinformation. And the only other example I'd give is ChatGPT. So Google DeepMind spends a lot of time trying to break it in the lab in London. One day they asked it to keep repeating the word poem over and over just to see what it would do. And eventually it started giving back personal data randomly on the back of that. So these are all things that would hopefully come out in testing. And Google themselves said that they hadn't done enough testing, apparently.
I mean, if this is a technical issue, for me, it would be, for in my area, it's more the case of, over the course of my career, whether I've been investigating companies or markets or looking at them from the point of view of being, in a state body, testing what they're offering from a legal point of view, if we're buying in services or looking to collaborate or any of those situations, everyone goes to here's our technical spec, here's everything, this is how it all works. But nobody can actually explain it to people in plain English, or you forget basics. And it's because you're so concerned about getting everything right on the technical, which is really, really, really important. But as a startup, if you're trying to get people to work with you, to collaborate with you, to buy your offering, to help invest, you need to be able to explain the basics of this. So from a technical point of view, that's really important as well, because that sets the tone for how we then read the rest and understand the rest of your solution or what you're trying to bring about. So just, again, keep it simple as well. And if you can't simplify it in your own head, in terms of the technical things, then you're going to then have issues along the line with trying to convince others to take you on or to work with you, because we have to take on that risk. And if we don't understand it, that's a problem.
Some of the best advice I ever got in my PhD, which was on organizational learning, was, can you explain this to me like I'm your grandma who knows nothing about this? It's probably a good place to start.
It really is. It really is. And it just helps you, it helps everyone in the room and or on the, on the call remotely, everyone understand what the proposition is. And that's your starting point every single time. It's not really a pitch. It's about it's just about understanding what is it that you're offering, and be succinct about that, really understand that, I think.
So I think also might, I think probably in the startup phase, it's very exciting and all focused on the product, but trying to think down the road what else this might be used for, thinking around the corner, or looking around the corner, so that when you get to further along your journey, you're not going to be prevented from using it in that particular domain because it's too late, or you haven't taken the steps at the beginning, which are then needed, for example, if you end up in a high-risk domain under the AI Act.
One of the things you can do, sorry, Jared, to alleviate that is consequence mapping. I know they're using that in Accenture at the dock at the moment. It's incredibly useful of saying, what are the potential consequences 1 year, 5 year, 10 years out of what we're developing here? And then owning that and being fully transparent about the fact that it's going to need to be adapted as we move forward.
Yeah, I was just going to say on the fairness angle and the explainability. I mean, it's responsible AI, but in a lot of cases, it's going to be parallel to basically operational efficiency. So if you have a lending platform that's working with biased data, well, you'll just have bad lending. It's not even an ethics question. Even if you didn't care about ethics, who's going to be, buying loans from you with a system that doesn't work? Or if it's a higher tech system based on biased information, you're going to be suggesting the wrong employees to companies. So, who's going to be happy either way? So these things dovetail as well in reality.
All right, thank you for that. So you've mentioned it a couple of times already, the AI Act. With that, we're entering a new era of AI regulation because it's the first encompassing law of that kind. When it comes into implementing and enforcing the AI Act, what do you anticipate will be the biggest challenges for regulators?
I mean, Jared's already mentioned, and some of the panel have already mentioned, that the act is there, but it's not quite there. And there's going to be a lot more legislation, a lot more decisions, a lot more legislative activity in the form of guidelines, non-binding guidelines. So there's going to be a lot of writing coming down the line and a lot of reading. And I think what that means from a regulator's point of view is, if you look at the structure of what we have the EU AI office in Brussels, which is basically the center of where everything will be kind of based for matters related to AI that fall within the AI Act scope. But there are going to be multiple other regulators in all of the member states. And those regulators are not necessarily going to be set up in tidy new regulatory offices. So where you have, for example, the GDPR is regulated by the Data Protection Commission, or you have Comreg regulating telecommunications and broadcasting, or mobile and cloud platforms, for example. It's unclear at the moment how a regulator is actually going to look in each of the member states. And it could be that we know for the moment, like for financial services, that when it comes to markets, the central bank is already involved. We know that there could be other regulators like the CCPC involved. So what does this mean from a startup point of view? It means that there could be multiple regulators involved, but what we're hoping is that they are all going to find a way to try and coordinate their own behavior and to find a way to make this work. So this isn't the first time that we've had a situation like this, where you have multiple regulators working together in different areas. We've had it in other sectoral areas. We've had it in other kind of, technological developments that have changed everything. But I think the problem that we have here is that it isn't at first instance clear who could be the right regulator for what we're trying to regulate. And I think that that's going to take a little bit of time. I don't think we're going to have a centralized body for quite some time. And I think the problems then that you have is that you have what we've seen before, because it isn't new how we regulate. If there is going to be an enforcement matter, who takes that enforcement action? How is that going to be looked at in different countries? Could we have forum shopping? How would that even work? And by forum shopping, I mean how if you find that one regulator might be slightly more how do we put it, more aware of the commercial realities of situations than another regulator that is maybe more concerned with the rights to civil society, or even though they have to cover all of that. So you can find situations where, some regulators may be more popular than others with different types of organizations. And the thing is that that's something that has to be managed as well, so that everyone is fairly represented and that the enforcement and regulation is fairly done, so that it doesn't matter if you're an individual in Ireland, an individual in Greece, or you're in Finland. You have the same rights, you have the same protections. The risk that you face should be managed and regulated and enforced in the same way by those who are responsible for enforcing the law. And so I think it's going to be tricky. It's never impossible. It's just going to be a little bit different.
I think go ahead. Do you want to go ahead, Leisha? I was just going to say, just from talking to one of the regulators the other day, it looks like the Consumer and Competition Authority is going to be the lead AI regulator in Ireland. And then you'll have a few, like the Commission Naman is going to be an associate regulator to the extent that AI overlaps with its remit in online safety. So certainly it's not going to be simplistic world that we're walking into.
And then add to that, the NSAI
Exactly.
will be involved as well. But I think even once the landscape is cleared up, I think a major challenge, and it may seem a bit trite, but it's going to be resources. So both the personnel, so getting the AI experts appropriate, and other bodies are going to need them as well. So there's going to be a great demand for that, I think, skill set. And then resources in terms of the technology in order to allow the enforcement to take place. I think that's going to be a major challenge. I mean, even already the AI office in Europe is struggling with getting the personnel they need. So I think that's going to be a problem in Ireland.
I think it's going to be a little bit like the fact that on LinkedIn you could see it almost overnight when ChatGPT launched, everyone became an AI ethicist all of a sudden in their profiles. I think what's, we have to also remember that this is a social issue. Governance is a social issue. We need social acceptance on this. I think it's okay also for us to say it's a bit messy at the moment. We don't really know what's going on. We're going to have help each other through it. But I would say be very careful of snake oil salespeople coming through. There's going to be a lot of consultants without the right kind of background, potentially. But here's another question, are we going to use AI to fix the messiness that AI is causing? I think the answer is probably yes.
I think just on the question about the challenges for the regulators, I think a big one for the AI Act is the standards. So what has happened in Europe is they decided to put AI into the existing product liability regime that's there. And what that traditionally is stopping dangerous washing machines blowing up in our face that come into the EU. So that's like a machine that you can take apart into parts and figure out how it works. And traditional software works like that, right? You could break down code into parts and see how it works. But machine learning doesn't work like that, okay? Where you have a black box. So it's going to be quite a challenge to fit this unusual, strange new technology into this relatively old product liability regime, which is used to dealing with machines and parts. And really the standards that are needed now is not how the piston connects with the screws. It's the non-tangible harms, the fundamental rights, right to a livelihood, privacy, all these things that AI can damage. They don't actually have those standards yet, and they're being drawn up as we speak. That's going to be quite a challenge, I think.
So it's like evil teddy bears that, could do, that could be quite dangerous now being regulated to make sure that they're not so evil. It's a strange mix, of regulatory basis for creating a law, but they felt that this was the right way to look at it from a product point of view, with bolt-on fundamental human rights, which is from all of our points of view, it's definitely interesting. But we'll see how that works. But I think one of the things, just again for startups, and really important, is there is recognition of the fact that all of this regulation has a disproportionate impact on smaller entities, smaller organizations. There is, within the EU AI office, I think, was it in February, March, they set up there's an SME starter pack, which kind of is to help understand and navigate this roadmap, this road that we're going to be on for quite some time. But it's also about making yourselves aware of the kind of resources, the collective resources that can be made available to help with the regulatory side of things, because most startups are not going to have a compliance team, a risk team, an audit team. It's usually going to be half of one person's thinking brain for 2 hours of the day who's doing all of this kind of work. So it's a case of, again, the first question, I think, and about collaboration as well, from a governance point of view, what you need to get right is go back to the basics again about understanding how you're going to work with a regulator, because you may be called in, you still be subject to it, but how are you going to explain what you've done? They're not going to ask you to have the level of governance that maybe Google has, but they'll need to know that in spirit you've done the best that you can, and you need to understand what it is that you have to do.
I would say as well, keep an eye on what's coming down the line. You know, in my opinion, there's no question we're going to need a personal IP over owning ourselves in terms of deepfake and what's going to be able to be replicated. There's governance and regulation issues coming down the line that are enormously impactful for human rights. You know, so just keep one eye on that as well in terms of what you're reading, and then try and be as discerning as you can about where you're getting your information from. There's a huge amount of information out there, and let find out, is this a trusted source, or seek out others that would know that you know that are reputable.
We saw with GDPR, Jared, you would have seen it a lot at the start. All of a sudden, all of these thousands and thousands, millions of specialists came out, certified DPO, a data protection officer. I'm like, geez, that's interesting. Certified, where's the certification from? Yes, well, it's, certifiably so. And, that was about it, so it was like the University of Certifiably So. And I said, well, that's definitely going to work now from, the risk point of view. Great, So you're going to see a lot of that. And that's what you have to be careful about. And there are organizations that are starting to build. So, I mean, a lot of what you have to do in AI governance is also, there's a lot of, kind of sensibility, street smarts about it as well. You don't have to be, scientist to understand, or a lawyer to understand what you have to do. There's a lot of common sense. So there are some areas where you can borrow from. So some of the data protection people, some of those, the independents, you can go to those and talk to them. A lot of those kind of risk-based approach, the understanding what a governance framework actually looks like. And what does that mean for you? Don't be buying something off the shelf. You can't buy it off the shelf. It just won't work. You have to have it tailored for you. It doesn't have to cost the world. It just has to be meaningful, accurate, and reflective of what you're doing.
All right. Then I think we mentioned a lot of messiness here in the regulatory space. And my next question is kind of related to that. So the AI ecosystem is a global ecosystem. And how can startups make sure to comply with all the rules and regulations across multiple jurisdictions worldwide?
Yeah, I can start off on that one anyway. I think what we're clearly looking at is a Brussels effect 2.0 with the AI Act. It is a very different piece of legislation to the GDPR, but certainly the hope of Brussels is that there would be this second effect where the AI Act becomes the gold standard globally. And it is, like, by a long way, the first one out of the post at the moment. So if you, as a startup, I think the best advice is start aligning yourself more and more with the AI Act, because it's a higher standard than what's out there globally. If you do your risk assessments under the AI Act, if you do your data governance, if you have your quality assurance system, all of those things. So there's an act coming in Canada in about a year called AIDA. It's an AI and Data Act. That's quite similar to the AI Act. The UK approach is there isn't going to be an act. It's a decentralized system where there's an AI safety office, and they're going to have principles which other regulators can apply but don't have to. That's a much lower standard than the EU. So in a sense, you would be covering off the UK. Then likewise, South America, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, they're all following the EU approach as well. So if you're doing business in South America, following the EU approach is going to help. The only one I'd say which is quite different is China. They have a number of AI laws, and some of them require you to align with socialist values and things like that in your technology. That is a different space, but for sure, it's time and money saved now if you start aligning yourself to the EU approach.
That's super advice. I was also going to say, you just remember that in the multiple jurisdictions, you're working across multiple socio-cultural contexts, you know, and that's going to impact upon it. You know, the word ethics means different things to different people.
Then I guess in terms of this, I guess ties into what we were saying before, when it comes to AI governance, it's, you know, it never ends. It's, you know, painting the Golden Gate Bridge. So it's never as if we're going to say it has now been governed, something will change. So you need to kind of be, I guess, agile and be alive to that as well.
Yeah, and I think it's good just on what you're saying, Lollie, to remember, I suppose, that the EU values are EU values. They don't determine the way the world works. There is a very large African AI ethics movement, for example, as well. Totally different way of looking at life, just to try and get ourselves out of our box.
And not least the 2.7 billion people that are still in digital darkness. You know, we assume everyone is connected to the internet, and that's actually not the truth. Yeah.
All right, then that brings me to the last question on my end. So looking ahead, do you think compliant or AI, so do you think startups that leverage AI governance, they can use it as a competitive advantage in the market? And does that create any sort of trust or relationship or credibility with investors, the ecosystem, customers? How do you see that? Because I have a very particular German view on that. And with Aleph Alpha going, like, their flagship sentence is, we are the European alternative to OpenAI. So there does seem to be something about it, but I'm super curious to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Absolutely. I think that if you think about what it is that you're trying to do, you're trying to create something, maybe you have something ready to go. Do you want that to be used in your bedroom? Or do you want that to be out in the world? And if it's going to be out in the world, you're going to have to interact with other people. And those other people are organizations who have their own value systems. And it's also society, customers, individuals. And so what are they all familiar with? So they're familiar with things that are common across the board, which are things like laws and regulation, and also certain types of words, a certain type of language. So in a way, you have to become, you have to sort of really dig deep into your linguistic skill set and start to learn a new language. Because what you are trying to do is you're trying to tell people, back me, I'm okay, I can be relied on. I am not going to mess things up for you, because I don't want to take on your mistakes if I'm buying your solution or if I'm investing you. I don't want that. I also don't want to be using something that is going to impact me that I know that you have no way of fixing if this goes wrong. And that's the problem. It's not even just about the financial fix. I could go to court, I could sue you, I could do whatever, but that's not going to change the impact. And it's not just reputation. We're not talking just about the reputation or the commercial stuff here. We're talking about the impact that it has on me as an individual, or even you in terms of your next gig, your next attempt to create something else, and that's going to follow you. So by being competitive, what you're doing here is you could wait until everything is settled. It'll never be settled. I'll just let you in on that secret. But what I would prefer for, creative, technological savvy people who have a conscience, who have, who are ethically minded, if you want to get ahead, if you want to compete, you get out ahead of everything else and you set the standard, recognizing where the direction is going here. You do not want to wait for regulators or for other companies that you may not be aligned with, whatever approach you're taking, whether you're, acting for the Sith or whether you're acting, for the Jedi. It doesn't matter. You want to be able to write your own narrative. And so that's really important, that you get to grips with what it is that governance, AI governance, actually means and how you are selling it. You do not want it imposed on you. The last thing you want is this thing that you've spent so long putting together, some really, really great idea, some really, really great opportunity, to be kind of whittled down and changed and transformed until it becomes something that fits in with a compliance standard that may not necessarily have to be that way. So take control of that, but understand the language that you have to use, and you have to understand and reflect in how you are governing your own ideas, your own solutions, and what happens when they go out into the world.
I think as well, flip it on its head, to use your integrity and reliability and trustworthiness of compliance as your competitive advantage.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things you could do is you could say, look at our company, we have algorithmic opacity. We are fully aware of, of the fact that there's biased data. We're fully aware. We're working hard to do this. We can see this in Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming behind. They have a BS a way of discerning what is true and what is not. Like kind of, they have this sort of inbuilt meter to say, don't wash me over gender washing, greenwashing, tag washing, like kind of like, tell me how it is. And they really, really appreciate that level of honesty. So use that to your advantage. We can see that in some beautiful startups at the moment that are just saying, we don't have it all covered, but we're on this journey together, and we're doing the best that we can, rather than waiting for it to come afterwards, and then leverage that as a competitive advantage yourselves.
Yeah, I think exactly. I would certainly agree with the other panelists on that. I think what's going to happen is that when it's enacted, the AI Act is going to, it's going to be a fear factor associated. People are going to be more conservative, not dissimilar to GDPR when people kind of like recoiled from data for a while. So I think the most important thing is to look at it in a holistic sense, and not just say, oh, we're complying with the AI Act, but look, we have this AI governance policy. We've thought, as Lollie was saying, we've thought about these issues, and these are the things that we're doing to address that. And it could be, having an advisory board, or, pivoting what you already have. So if you're doing work in relation to the GDPR in any event, that's repackaged in terms of your more holistic AI governance. But I think that people are going to want to be able to see like clear and demonstrable compliance and AI governance in a kind of proactive way. And I think that's going to be the competitive advantage.
The only thing I'd say, I suppose, if you try to boil it down to its simplest, with AI, we're trying to maximize its benefits and minimize the risks. It's kind of as simple as that. And risks are bad for business, and responsible AI will help you with those risks.
Yeah, it's also good to understand your competition. Who are you competing with for whatever it is that you're competing with? Do you know what they're doing from an AI governance point of view? Because a lot of this stuff has to be available to read somewhere. Whether it's on your on a website, whether it's wherever it is, but you can discern a lot about what's happening in the market from what others are doing, and understanding what's happening out there. And that's how you understand, in as much as you would brand differentiate, or you would look at yourself differently, use the law, use whatever you can to show that you are different and in this way, trustworthy. Because, you don't have to say bad things about a competitor, but you can understand what's out there in the world, and then you can act on that and look to the companies that you want to work with, or the class of people who are going to be affected by what you do. What are their issues? What is meaningful to them? This is how you get out ahead of things, thinking differently, but thinking meaningfully about what it is, and understanding the environment in which you are. So AI governance is about what you're doing, but you're not doing that in isolation, and understanding, what's happening in the environment in which you are in. Everyone's competing on every point, so every point. Don't think that this is, oh, look, we'll just leave it. Every point matters.
I think it comes down to mindset, right? So, I mean, if we talk about flipping it on its head and turning it around, it's not like, oh God, compliance, governance, oh God, like how can we turn around and say, ask yourself the question, how can I delight and excite my future customers by being compliant, by showing trustworthiness, by saying I haven't got all the answers, by sort of saying, we're in this together. That they're going to believe in you and buy into your products and your sales and you as a company through this level of sort of authenticity. So how do we become authentic with governance and compliance, and how do we become excited about it?
They may even be able to help you plug those gaps. You see, this is the thing, so working with different companies, different sizes over the years, I've seen people come in with amazing ideas and but they haven't got the answer to something, to your point, which is, and I was like, well, I wonder what is the answer? So then you start working with them to kind of find solutions because it's beneficial, and we can address that. And that authenticity is really important, I think.
I think the other thing to remember as well, if you're inauthentic, you've no choice anyway. So if you're in the high risk category, you won't be allowed to sell your AI product in the EU. So whether it's ethical or not, it's coming, unfortunately.
I didn't want to interrupt. Okay,
Let's end it there.
Mic'd up. Okay, then we'll have time for one or two more questions in the audience. If you raise your hand, my colleague will throw the little cube microphone at you. Okay.
That wasn't.
Thank you. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the sectors that we're looking at for governance. So it feels like there's a lot of talk around governance for the financial sector, for the health sector. And I see how that's a mountain, but manageable. So something like mortgages, credit, any decision-making thing where it uses a set of features to come up with we already have quantifiable metrics for fairness that we can use, quantifiable metrics for security, privacy data. It's a mountain, but it's manageable and it's being talked about and you feel like, okay, this is being taken care of. But in regards to what's coming out of academia, what's coming out of industry, there's just almost no conversation around recommender systems. So if you look at newspapers have to, they make a mistake, they have to print a redaction. That newspaper sits in a museum because it's important to know what people are seeing and hearing. But there is no accountability for recommender systems. So the newspapers are publishing articles and they're accountable for what they publish, but they don't decide what goes in the front page anymore. The front page of the newspaper is now decided by a private company like Google, like TikTok, Facebook. And I'm just wondering, why are we not talking about that? Is it because the mountain is so huge that we don't want to look at it? Or is it because there's no money in it? Is it, for me, that's the number one ethical governance issue. And I've worked in insurance and I've worked in Media House. And now I'm doing a PhD in ethical AI. And I'm just, I just don't understand why nobody's talking about recommender systems for content.
Is that one for me? Okay. I haven't thought about it a lot, but just thinking while you're asking, it will come under the remit of the DSA, I'm pretty sure, Digital Services Act, which Commission Demand will have to regulate. Certainly if there's at the moment, for example, the Commission have opened up an investigation into OpenAI, Meta and Google around misinformation, and it's under the Digital Services Act. It's the safety angle of it. Under the AI Act, then it could fall under a core public or private service. That's one of the high-risk categories, which are automatically high risk, which would mean it would need all the data governance and safety checks and human review, all of that kind of thing. It is a very big one though, yeah, for sure.
But I, even looking at like the AI Act, looking at ISO 42001, the AI management system ISO, there's nothing in there that I can see being shaking the boots of Google or TikTok. It's very like small extension of GDPR, extension of ISO 27. These are not like, there's nothing in there that really is super concerning for them. There's nothing in there that would make them have to really be accountable for their recommenders. It's very much focused on stuff that's applicable for other sectors.
So I have some colleagues in UCD who are doing work on the DSA and the recommender systems, and I think it's what you're talking about, and so I can chat to you afterwards about the stuff they're doing.
All right, one very short one.
More valuable, my phone.
Work like a charm.
To be a bit divisive about it, I'm in the AI space myself, so developing our own AI, so I'd have a good understanding what's going on. Is the genie not out of the box, though, a little bit, in the sense of trying to get regulation to chase what we're doing? Because one of the fundamental things about what makes it so remarkable is it's community driven. I mean, it's almost all open source, right? So you can move analytics, you can move results around to whatever jurisdiction you want. And that's also completely community driven. So I just wanted to put that to you. This is going to be really difficult. Unless it's a global thing, it's going to be very difficult.
I think to an extent, like I don't think we're ever going to be 100% successful, like, no regulation is in any event. But I think at the very least, not unlike the GDPR, it will modify behavior. I think it'll give people pause for thought that they, didn't before. If that's one small step, I think it's worth taking.
Laws are always catching up. Regulation is always catching up. But governance is, as we said at the outset, it's quite different. Governance is really about more than just compliance with the law and compliance with, those kinds of norms. Murder wasn't on the statute books for hundreds of years, and yet we've had people killing, but we all knew it was wrong. And we've found ways through society, through the millennia, of managing these types of issues. And what I'm saying, I'm not equating AI with murder, but what I'm trying to say is that we don't have to rely fully on the law to regulate behavior. There is self-regulation. There is something that we do in the interest of society, and how do we actually make sure that that's manifested and protected. And I know, coming from a lawyer, that sounds a bit strange, but the law is always behind. It's always trying to kind of build. One of the things that the EU AI Act drafters tried to do, which wasn't done with the GDPR and a lot of other types of regulatory instruments, was to try and future-proof it. And that was through the annexes at the end as well, so to try and allow for changes. But there is that concern that it's out of the box, it's alive, it's going for it.
I think just on that, I suppose you're right, okay, in the sense that the way technology advances, there's a proliferation phase where it goes out there into everyone's hands. And there is no unringing the bell, and nor should we try to either. And the AI Act is not aspiring to do that. It's trying to just add a risk consciousness in on top of what is an unstoppable process. Okay, so there's demand out there for ChatGPT. That's why 200 million people used it after 2 months. So you can't deny that. This is trying to add in this extra element to make sure that the whole thing, and it's even more than ethics. This is actually about stopping AI from undermining itself. We all want the promise and the benefit from it. So we would have some overheated monstrosity if it wasn't guided. But yeah, so it's not stopping development, it's guiding development is the spirit of it.
I think there may be a case, though, that the governance does halt innovation or certainly stagnate innovation and put people off for a period of time. It's incredibly overwhelming. I think the majority of the population is very fearful about all of this. The kind of the conversations I'm not hearing government talk about business hospices, for example, or how those changes will occur. It does seem very much trying to shut Pandora's box in some elements. Even in the education sector, we don't have alignment even across Ireland in the university sector, yet alone across Europe in terms of how we're dealing with it. So yeah, it's all a little bit of what I'm going to call an exciting time.
Could I just give just because it's such an important point. I promise not to steal the bandwidth. So I have a 13-year-old daughter, right? Just to anecdotally present this, and I caught her. She hates Irish, so sorry to all the Gael girls. I caught her using ChatGPT to write her Irish essays, right? And I said to her, I said, you can't do that, you'll be caught. And she said, but it's only school, it's not the real life, right? And it's really brought it home to me that the opportunity, just in terms of one thing that we could do at NI, is really look at what we're doing in education, and to bring back your point to ethics. If we don't bring the human side into technology, we're really up the creek, right? Because this is profound. But there is an opportunity to completely look at education now and quickly and get rid of measurement and
listen, I'd get rid of the Leaving Cert in a heartbeat if it was my choice.
I swear to God, like you could have AI and humans working together to create, or whatever it is we do, but to get rid of and transform our education system, because the next generation, these things are changing at a monthly basis. We were looking at paradigm shifts.
Like we're dinosaurs in comparison to what's coming. The idea of personalization, the idea of different learning styles, neurodiversity, you know, how education is taught, what it's going to look like. We saw during COVID, you know, there were some enormous changes. Some educational institutions just uploaded slides. Other people completely adapted the way that they taught, you know, when they were online. It is a huge opportunity and a huge challenge. And I'll definitely talk to you after the panel about it. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to cut anyone off, but I'm guessing we're going to get kicked out very soon. So a massive thank you to all of you for joining us here today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.